Hello and welcome to IBTimes TV. I'm Leanna Brinder, Business Editor for the International Business Times. Joining us today for an exclusive interview is Natalie Ceeney. She's the CEO of the Financial Ombudsman. So hi.
Hi.
Hi, well, as someone who's one of the youngest female chief executives in the UK, what has it been like working at a senior level in financial services?
It's been an interesting experience. So I joined the world of financial services 3.5 years ago, and I'd worked in a variety of fields in the NHS, in consultancy, in public services, where actually female representation is about 50-50. Financial services is certainly very different. There aren't many CEOs who are female, and I've been to a couple of industry dinners where I have been the only woman in the room who isn't serving drinks. And it does lead to a different and sometimes a bit worrying tone of conversation.
Sure, but I mean, some critics say, why should it matter about female representation? What will be, and any setting any quotas is just a box-ticking exercise.
I mean, I really worry about the box-ticking exercise, and I'd hate to ever be put in a position where I was appointed to a job because I was female rather than because I was the best candidate. But why does it matter? Well, there's an awful lot of scientific evidence now that the best teams have mixed gender representation. There have been studies repeated again and again that show whatever study you do, a mixed team gets a better result than an all-male team. But I think more importantly, women are half the population. Having senior management where you don't make your jobs accessible to half the population surely can't be the best way of harnessing talent. We've got to harness all the talent that's out there and not just half the population.
Well, how about what the incumbent challenges it is for a woman to progress in this industry, as well as maybe other challenges that have developed over time?
Well, I think there are a number of things here. Most frequent issue I hear is better childcare policies, and of course that's part of the solution, but letting women come back after having kids isn't the whole solution. I think there's two issues here. One is, do women actually want to be part of the senior management club? And if you're a middle management woman and you look up at, say, an entirely male board, and their idea of a team away day is to go to a golf club, or worse, to celebrate success, to go into a lap dancing club, is that a club you want to be part of? And for a lot of women, that's the first barrier. But the second one is, actually, how do we enable women to be their best? So we know, any marketing department knows, you use different modes of marketing to get to different audiences. And yet we don't apply the same to our workforce. So, for example, I know that women are less likely than men to crow about their achievements. They're more likely to succeed if you look at what people are achieving rather than ask them to brag. And yet an awful lot of recruitment policy relies on people going, look at me and what I've achieved. Similarly, my experience is if I advertise a job and require 10 things for a job, the men will apply when they've got 2 of them. The women will only apply when they've got 9. Actually, as a senior manager, I probably want about 6 or 7. So there's something about recruitment practices and the whole raft of policies that you need to just allow women to be their best, and then you'll get the cream of all of your talent.
Well, the industry overall has gone through mass changes since 2006, and the Ombudsman has obviously changed as well in terms of whether it's headcount or policies. Maybe you can walk us through some of the developments over the last few years.
Well, as you say, the last 4 or 5 years in financial services have been turmoil for everybody concerned. And what the Ombudsman does is see problems and see things when they go wrong. So our workload has gone up actually tenfold in the last 13 years. And part of the issue here is that consumers have just seen scandal after scandal, and they no longer trust their bank or insurer to give them the right answer. We're also gone through some of the toughest economic times in most people's living memory. And so that £50 you don't think you've got from an insurance policy, before you might have just moaned about it, now you might do something about it and complain. But also, we're in an era of social media where people can find out what's wrong. They've got Martin Lewis telling them what's gone wrong with their packaged bank account or PPI. They've got Which reviewing banks. And so as a result, if something does go wrong, consumers are more likely to be aware of it and more likely to be aware of their rights. And I think if you put those things together, it's no surprise that's led to massive rise in complaint volumes. For me, running the Financial Ombudsman Service, we've had to triple our size in the last 3 years just to cope.
I mean, one of the standout, I suppose, most expensive scandals for the banks over recent years is the PPI misselling. So maybe we can use that as a case study and what can be learnt from something like that.
I think a huge amount's been learnt from PPI. I mean, it has been the biggest mis-selling scandal in British history. So far, the banks have paid out over £10 billion in compensation, and yet only just over 10% of all consumers sold PPI policies have so far complained. And we now know 50 million policies were sold, many of which to people who could never use the policy or didn't even know they'd bought it. Some of the things that went wrong, for a start, this scandal went on for well over a decade. And banks knew there were a problem for many years, but they didn't do anything about it until the regulator finally clamped down in 2010. So lesson number one has got to be that when problems arise, everybody, the financial institution and the regulator, needs to deal with it promptly and not let it grow to a multi-billion-pound scandal. And I think the other lesson is don't wait for something to be complaints-led. I mean, we have now dealt with we've now received almost 1 million complaints about PPI. That doesn't feel like the most efficient way of doing things.
Well, can the Ombudsman actually be a place as an early warning sign itself, being able to pick up on those issues?
Sometimes the Ombudsman can be an early warning sign. So we're often the place where we'll see one or two things bubbling. Maybe a financial institution doesn't realise that a new product they've introduced has inherent problems, or that their salespeople in a particular branch are doing something badly, and we can be a very good early warning sign there. But sometimes we can't be. So one of the things about inherent issues in financial services is that most consumers don't have enough information to know whether what they've bought is right or wrong. So think pensions, it might be 20 years before someone's bought a pension realises that pension doesn't do how it was described, or a complex investment, only when the market downturns do people realise that it might have said it was guaranteed, but actually it wasn't. And so one of the issues is actually people don't always complain when something's gone wrong. They often complain many, many years later. And so we can't always be an early warning sign for that. We also have quite strict limits. We only deal with individuals and small businesses up to 10 people. So sometimes things affect larger businesses. And again, the Ombudsman can't be an early warning sign. So I'd say any business or regulator that's relying on the Ombudsman to tell them when things have gone wrong, that can't be the only answer. Financial institutions need to look to themselves to do the right thing, pick up problems early. And equally, the regulator needs to ensure that they pick up things early, using their own insight as well as ours.
Great. And so rounding off, what's next for the Financial Ombudsman?
Well, we've still got an awful lot to work with PPI. It's easy to think the saga is over. We're still receiving 2,000 complaints every single working day, and we're not yet seeing a sign of drop-off. That's going to keep us very busy. We're still seeing an awful lot of issues, unfortunately. So our complaints about packaged bank accounts are rising. We're seeing complaints about mobile phones rising. Unfortunately, we're still seeing too much that's wrong. But we do an awful lot of work with financial institutions and with the regulator, the FCA and the OFT, to try and use that insight, because my goal is to help bring complaints down and help rebuild consumer trust in financial services, as well as deal with problems when they arise.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. That was Natalie Ceeney. She's the CEO of the Financial Ombudsman.